Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello, Check Your Threadheads. I hope you're doing well. Okay, super quick programming announcement. You may have noticed that this is the 52nd episode of the podcast. That's 52 consecutive weekly episodes, i.e., we have released an episode every week for a freaking year. So much time and effort has gone into making that happen, and there were plenty of times over the last year when it was really tricky to do so, particularly when the kids were home or other life stuff came up. So, we deserve a break. So after today's, there will be no new episodes for 2 weeks whilst my family and I go to Italy. We'll be back with a new episode the week beginning the 14th of August, which will be the first birthday Ask Me Anything episode that I just recorded. Thanks so much everyone who submitted a question for that. It was super fun. So please take care of yourselves over the next 2 weeks. If you haven't listened to every episode that we've released to date, maybe you could use these 2 weeks to catch up. Just an idea. Anyway, so this episode is on the longer side, so I'm going to keep this intro pretty brief today. I want to thank the podcast's newest patron, Morgan. Thank you so much, Morgan, for supporting via Patreon. If you feel that you are able to support the podcast and help us make another year's worth of episodes, please find the link in the show notes or on the website checkyourthread.com. It is super easy and literally takes less than a minute to sign up. So this episode is the second in a row to feature a multi-talented, thoughtful woman doing exciting things in London. Last week you heard me speak to Barley Massey from Fabrications, and today you'll hear a conversation with the multifaceted talent that is Bella Gonshorovitz. Originally from Tel Aviv, Bella is a fashion designer, maker, author and collaborator who has recently had her first book published. It's called Grow, Cook, Dye, Wear, From Seed to Style the Sustainable Way. The book is all about creating garments that are infused with experience, personality and meaning. Bella is a truly inspiring and thoughtful person, and personally I've taken a lot from our conversation. Show notes this week include some pictures that will give you a proper visual on what we're talking about in this conversation, including the amazing bed installation and the legendary Mr. Sadiq, which you'll soon learn all about. So get your listening ears ready to enjoy this episode and have a great 2 weeks. Here we go. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you for having me.
I've really enjoyed looking at your book so far. You seem like a super cool person, so I'm really excited to get the chance to get to know you a bit. So for the listeners and for myself, really, could you please start by telling us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days?
Oh, wow. My name is Bella Gonshorovitz, and it's increasingly becoming hard, I guess, to define what I do. I was trained as a fashion designer. I have many different hats. I think at the moment I'm a fashion designer / maker / author, which is something that I'm getting used to saying the last month since the book came out. And a collaborator. I'm always a collaborator, I feel. Everything that I've done, including the book, is the fruit of collaboration. So, yes.
So you're in London, is that right?
Yeah, I am in London, in Walthamstow, North East London, where I live. I live and work in my flat, and I have an allotment about 2 miles away from my flat, which kind of became the ground for the book, if you like, which we'll get to soon.
Yes, I cannot wait to get into that. Awesome. So you've just written a very cool book called Grow, Cook, Dye, Wear. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we'll dig more, excuse the pun, into the book in a bit. But first, can you tell us a bit about your background as a maker and a fashion designer? Because that was your career for quite a long time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it still kind of is. And
Right.
It's been a very long path. So I've been doing it for, I guess it's been nearly 20 years since I've started my BA. And I done my BA in London. I moved to London to do my BA from Tel Aviv. And then I got a job in New York City for 3S4, which I still very much adore. They make beautiful clothes. Really interesting. All the seams are curved because they believe that the body is curved, so everything should go around the body. Really intricate patterns.
Sorry, who was that? Who were you working for there?
3as4.
Cool.
3as4. And I also, at the time, also freelanced a bit for Alexander Wang. And then I was kind of, for a period between New York and Tel Aviv, working for Gotex and a wonderful women's wear and lingerie brand called Gertrude. And then in 2012, I moved back to London because I really missed it. But also I got into a postgraduate degree in Central St. Martin's. Title of that was Innovative Pattern Cutting for Fashion Professionals.
Oh, wow.
I felt in my work as a designer, particularly at 3as4, but in all the brands, that I felt like to be a really good designer, I needed to have such a strong understanding of how to construct clothes. I always spend more time in the room of the pattern cutters and the ateliers rather than in the design room. I was very interested in what kind of possibility it's given me, and I just wanted to dive a bit deeper. And that course was just
that really informs the designs, doesn't it?
It really does. And I think every course it's so different, but actually when you do a fashion design degree, or at least as I said, I've done one 20 years ago, I think the courses change. Yeah, pattern cutting is about, let's say, a fifth of your curriculum, and I really feel like it should be more.
It's so fundamental, isn't it?
Yeah, you can make a beautiful sketch, but if you actually don't understand how it's going to work in terms of cutting, which you would be amazed of how many designers wouldn't, and pattern cutters are very used to that, I think, as well.
Yeah, they must be eye-rolling the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. I just loved us. I worked with just amazing pattern cutters in my whole career, really, and learned so much from them. So I really wanted to get into that world. And then when I graduated, I had a very strong idea of where I wanted to go into in terms of fashion in London. Back then, it was the time that Phoebe Fowler was at Celine, and I absolutely adored the clothes. I just remember going to shops, going to Dover Street Market or Selfridges to look at them, and they just looked like they were made by angels. I was absolutely fascinated by how utterly, I don't use the word much, but they actually looked perfect. And I really tried to get into these kind of jobs, and whilst I was applying and trying to get in, I had a friend who asked me to make a few dresses for her, and she was in the arts community, and she started wearing the clothes, and I started getting a kind of this drip of people saying, "Oh, I've seen so and so wearing dresses that you made, would you make me some?" And I was like, well, okay, great, it's a good source of income. And my friend Miria had a studio then. I said, well, could I pay you a bit and use it sometime? And then all of a sudden it just became this kind of, I wouldn't say avalanche, but just this constant kind of like, well, I've seen it, because it just grew. And I remember...
So it was like a really organic thing. It wasn't like, I'm going to start this label now.
It was, and it wasn't really a label, because it wasn't like, it was constantly like me working, again, in collaboration with the people. So it wasn't like, oh, I want the same dress, but I want something that would work for me. Cool. Because they were all from the art world, and mostly artists, women artists. So something that works with their identity as an artist as well. It's quite a complicated thing. At some point, I had this conversation with my friend Asaf, who I worked with him quite a bit after the postgrad as well, because he was doing his MA at St. Martin's, and I worked with him on the graduation collection. And he said to me, I think you should stop applying for all these jobs, but I think you have a business already. And I became quite resentful of that in the beginning, because I felt, well, I want to do fashion, and perhaps that working in that way, I thought, it's more for dressmaker rather than fashion. Because I was a bit like it. I mean, it's completely foolish now when I look back at it. And actually, once I kind of understood that actually there was so much into it, and actually a lot more room perhaps for creativity than working for brands.
Yeah. So what's that distinction that you were making then between fashion and a dressmaker? So as in, you wanted to be designing, you didn't necessarily want to be involved in the manufacture of it?
No, I quite liked actually the hands-on thing, but I guess until that stage in my career, I had quite a few years of working on collections.
Right. Okay,
I really liked the idea of working on a collection and telling a story through a collection. Yeah. And, working around a certain calendar, working with an archive of an house, all these things that I was very interested also at the time of how fashion, kind of how, if you like to call it trends, but actually how fashion connects with culture and how things that happen in culture manifest through clothes, which to my feeling, and I guess I think I was wrong, was something that I could mostly investigate through working in such a prominent house.
Sure.
But once I started working with some of the clients that I still work with today. And actually last night was the first kind of big Royal Academy of Arts dinner after a few years of hiatus because of the pandemic, and I dressed again some of the artists.
Oh, cool.
So once I started having this relationship, building this relationship with a few cool artists and women that I started making clothes for, I found this sense of expression that I was looking for, I guess, or that I was hoping to get just from this job. Because in my mind before, it was, right, you either go for the fashion brands of the caliber of Celine and so, or you go for high street, or you can establish your own brand, which I never thought of as a very viable way, because you need to have really big investment or come with quite, a substantial amount, I always felt. To do it in London, I mean, I think there are many ways to do it, but in London it's quite just renting a studio, and yeah, it's expensive. But once I started working with them, and particularly with one of them, Kathy Pilkington, there's just opening this new world of finding way to express who they are through clothes, through the prism of how I see it. And also something that's really interesting that has happened is that, particularly with Kathy, but with others too, they kind of invited me into their art and started making fabric works in collaboration with me and big installations with fabrics.
Oh my goodness!
So yeah, it's
exciting.
It is. It's been just a huge privilege to be part of this world, and it's not something that that I kind of geared my career towards, and it's kind of a path that I just kind of followed, and it wasn't a direct line, but I got to the most wonderful places through that.
And it's so nice having those long-term relationships with people, and you can develop ideas together. And
we have this kind of, because for quite a few of them there's like a body of it's kind of interesting when I talk about collection. I feel like some of them have, like, I made them quite a lot of garments, so it's almost like they have their collection and then we reference, and it's almost like there's an archive in their wardrobe and we reference things.
So you kind of, you're exploring that in a similar way. How cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's so interesting. Did I see also that you have a master's in applied psychology in fashion?
Yeah. So that sounds
amazing. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that is something that I started in 2014, and in the same way, as much as I'm interested, or still interested in the kind of anthropological side of fashion, I've been really interested in the emotional side of clothes. And the reason that I originally wanted to study fashion design is that as a child I remembered everything through clothes. I remember this dress was the dress that I wore at so, and everything just became completely embedded in the clothing. And I was very interested in the emotional side of the way that we dress, and how as a designer you would have this effect or constant conversation with the people that wear your clothes. And another thing that I guess that I kind of skipped, and that's what I said about the many hats, that alongside working as a designer, I always done some writing on the side, mostly for magazines. But it was always in Hebrew, which is my mother tongue. Right. I grew up in Israel. And once I moved back to London, it just became increasingly harder. I wasn't so much in Tel Aviv as I was in the years before that, when I was working between New York and Tel Aviv. And I just thought, well, I should probably do a degree that would kind of force me to write in English and find my voice in English. And I thought about doing a journalism MA and kind of do it alongside what I do. So the MA in applied psychology and fashion, I've done it over 6 years, just really long stretch. And then the MA at London College of Fashion in applied psychology and fashion just started. And I thought, well, that's really interesting because it would allow me to explore this emotional side. And also it was kind of quite interesting to do a fashion degree, like coming from a very maker's hand-on, to go to something that is so academic.
Yeah.
Because it was really rigorous, the MA, and most of the people that were there came from a psychology background, and I was the weird one that, has no experience.
That's so interesting. So they were all kind of academics already, and you're like met halfway.
Yeah.
So did you find because of that you approached your studies in a very different way to the other people on the course?
Yeah, and I think it was actually we kind of helped each other, because actually a lot of the people that came from a psychology background, as I said, and they felt like perhaps there wasn't enough fashion input. And then I would kind of make, as we were in class, the connection, well, this is how you apply it. And so I could ask them to help with, what kind of research would you find that would support this? And I would help them with applying theory on things that are actually happening within the industry or within fashion in a kind of wider cultural context. So, yeah, and that's also during that time is when I became involved with the Centre for Sustainable Fashion, which is centred in London College of Fashion at University of Arts London. And that was really kind of the big kind of eye-opener in terms of sustainability. So when I started working in a made-to-measure way, it actually remedied a lot of the issues that I felt doing working in houses that are now understand of sustainability issues. But back then, before 2010 or 12, it was for me ethical. But all the brands that I worked with produced in a very kind of considerate way. And, none of it was fast fashion. Most of the clothes were really beautifully crafted. But there's still, you would have rooms of stock in the end.
Right.
Some styles just don't work. And they don't work sometimes because the factory made an error or because you got this fabric and, it's beautiful. But then you realize that after a wash, it just bleeds color and you would get loads of people asking for refunds for the bed sheets and so forth. All sorts of things that happen. And sometimes such a design is not good. Sometimes you have something in your head and you think, oh, that's brilliant. But then it just doesn't work for people. It might be working perhaps on your body when you're trying it, on the sample model that we have, but it just doesn't work in real life. And you just have rooms and stock, and I just always thought, well, what are we doing here? That feels quite intuitively wrong. And when I started getting involved with the Centre for Sustainable Fashion, I think that was kind of 2015, 16, and started kind of understanding more of the environmental impact. And I think that's generally when the kind of conversation around sustainability kind of moved from the margin, and now the margins are constantly growing into kind of the mainstream, really.
Yeah.
It was a real eye-opener, and it just kind of made me gear my practice in a different way and kind of use sustainability as a lens through which I view everything.
Awesome. That's kind of like what I'm trying to do with this podcast, really.
It is.
It's about sewing, but through the lens of sustainability. And I hope that then that bleeds out into kind of all the other areas of life as well. Because I think when you do become kind of more awakened, for want of a better word, about it in one area, you're like, well, then, okay, so I need to be more considerate about where I buy my clothes or how my clothes are produced. But then what about my shoes? What about my food? Like it really goes like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it all connects, really. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It really is. And once you start viewing things through that lens and you kind of, everything goes through it, there's almost like a no way back of unseeing what you previously didn't consider at all. Once I started looking things through that lens, there's something in me that, although you would think, oh, it's more work in a sense, everything just becomes like a bit more kind of a longer process, and it's more running around. There's one podcast recently that you spoke about cosmetics and refilling. I mean, it's more kind of, well, you do go to Boots to kind of leave your bottles, and there's like another stop.
And you go to the refill shop, and
but it just I feel like it just feels right. Considering what we know and what now is very much in the public realm of what we know and the trajectory that we're heading. So it's more effort, but it actually feels more in tune with the way things should be going. And
I feel there's almost, and I haven't fully articulated this thought yet, but it's almost there's a simplification, I guess, and maybe that comes to do with, and this sounds really negative, but restriction in a way. Like if I don't have all the choices in front of me of like every fibre, like personally I've decided not to buy polyester anymore. You kind of, okay, right, so that doesn't exist now, fine. But it kind of then simplifies things a little bit as well, I think. And maybe that comes with getting older as well and knowing yourself a bit more also. But it can give you then some more space within that smaller selection, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that is a really good way of looking at it. Yes, you kind of know which areas to do. You don't get bamboozled by choice, which is kind of what kind of arguably brought us to where we are, just kind of just being washed with things and constantly everything is in reach. And Kate Fletcher, who is part of the Centre of Sustainable Fashion.
Yes, I've met her.
Yeah, she's incredible, and she's just just released a new book recently, and she says that because there's this conversation of whether living sustainably is something that is just in reach for privileged people, and she says that the privilege should actually give you the choice to choosing less, which I think is really interesting and really kind of quite a poignant quote that made me think a lot.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that for a while. That's really interesting. Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so I'm picturing you're working as a designer, you've got your MA happening, you are presumably also cooking and eating food at this point. At what point did gardening and natural dyeing also become activities that you were involved in?
Yeah, so when I moved to the flat that I currently live and work in, it was in 2018, and I was very lucky that I applied for an allotment plot in the borough in Waltham Forest, and that happened incredibly quickly.
Wow.
Purely by luck, just because the day that they were showing the open plot, it was just the most dreadful December day with terrible weather, and I was one of very few people that came. So although I was number 87 on the list, I was actually second on the list on that day.
Amazing.
So I got this wonderful plot, and in the same time I was working with Cathy Pilkington, the artist that I mentioned a bit earlier, on a fabric-based installation in Pallant House in Sussex, in Chichester.
Right.
And it was in a townhouse, in a room that had this glorious 4-post bed. And we created this installation called Good Bed, Bad Bed, which had a quilt and a valance and a canopy and just drapes, a real kind of big textile project. And
I think we saw that on your website. If you don't mind, I'll put a photo of it in the show notes.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Please do. Yeah, it's very charged with emotion for both of us.
How so?
We worked on it for quite a while, and when I work with things with Cathy, they usually end up having almost like a different kind of life to what we started, but this one actually stayed quite close to how we envisioned it in the beginning. And there was just so much that happened in our personal lives in that time, and we worked on it, crafted for so long. We just stood in front of it and started crying when it was all installed. So when I worked with Cathy on that, and it has this kind of almost like a sunbeam kind of design, there's like lines that go through it. When people look on the website, they will see it. And it was all kind of different colours, and me and Cathy have this kind of colour references and colours that we have between us, and sometimes we would call it Louise, and just referring to something that Louise Bourgeois done in her work, or Eric on the something that Eric Gill done in his work, and we just kind of have this shared history because we worked on a lot of things, and colour was incredibly important in that piece of work because also there was so much of it, and we wanted to get to very specific shades, and it was clear to me that I need to do more dyeing, and I've dyed some dye work before for Cathy, and mostly synthetic dye, and I've done some tea and coffee before. Then as I got the allotment plots, I started getting a bit more into natural dye because I recognised at that point that the depth that you get from the colour and the kind of way that you can build it up is so different from synthetic colour, which I think gives you something that is rather flat. Yeah, and I started growing things, and just that was kind of like the very kind of baby steps of that. So still, I've done a lot of tea and coffee still in that project, but I already started working with rhubarb in that point as well, and a little bit of onion. And that was kind of the first time that I started really incorporating it in my work. And I started learning about it, getting some books, reading about it, experimenting and so on.
Yeah.
And I would sometimes involve it in my meta-measure practice, but there were a good couple of years. Yeah, it was a couple of years before I realised that the title of the book came into my head, Grow, Cook, Dye, Wear, because I kind of made this connection of, right, I'm growing things in the allotment, particularly the onions. That's how I start the book. I grow the onions in the allotment. Then I cook with them, I keep the skin, and then I dye it with, and I just thought, well, sounds like a really catchy title. What should I do with it? And I didn't really know. So my initial thought that I'll do a supper club, so people come and they buy, a ticket for the dinner, and then they kind of get the dress in the end, and it's the whole experience.
Oh, that's cool.
It is a cool idea, but I just felt
it's a lot of work for you.
It's a lot of work, and would it be worthwhile in the price? And that's something that's constantly, when you're making things with your hands and in a certain way, pricing it is always a difficult thing. And I kind of had this thing on the side, kind of said, right, there's this title, I need to think about doing something with it, but I don't know what yet.
Right. Oh, interesting. So the title was almost the first.
The title was there
before even the book as a concept came to you.
Did not think at all about making a book until I realised that should be a book. I never thought, when somebody, when people used to ask me, because I always used written quite a lot, would you write a book? And I said, yeah, maybe one day when I retire. So it wasn't at all on the plan. And then the pandemic happened, and something that I didn't expect at all is that in the first lockdown, mid-April, I got a call from a medic from a West London hospital that I didn't know, who got my number through a mutual aid group, and she said to me, I don't know you, but I work in this hospital, and we don't have any gowns, any protective gowns, PPE. And none of us know how to sew, and we're desperate. Would you sew us some? And it was Friday night. I looked at the material the night. I realised it's very expensive. And I thought, right, I really want to help them, but financially probably can't, because you had to buy a minimum amount. And
sure.
yeah, and I just thought, well, how am I going to do it? And I just realized, right, I'm going to start a crowdfunder. And I started a crowdfunder the next day. And it was just that weekend. The PPE just ran through in all the hospital, ran out in all the hospitals in the UK. So it was just constantly in the news. And because of that, and because I had the very kind support of James O'Brien, who I wrote to and said, I really need to help with raising funds to do this, I raised £36,000, which the target was to raise 2,000 just to help that particular hospital. But with that came other hospitals that got in touch and said, we don't have any gowns either, could you help us? So I started putting together this team of seamstresses and a lot of people like myself that I know that work in the industry that were all kind of, out of work essentially and had machines at home, because the tricky thing was that you couldn't really open factories at the time. We know
next to people.
You can't. Yeah. I mean, we know that in Leicester there was a big outbreak because some factories that are more kind of sweatshop factories were forced to work for the pandemic, because it's a very close, very moist environment as well because of all the steam. So it's like a really good breeding ground for something that spreads in the air and likes humidity. So that happened. I never thought and don't think I would ever hope. I hope that I never get to do again, make garments that are life-saving. It was particularly when the doctor got in touch with me, because my dad used to work in A&E when I was a child. I just felt like, well, I just could imagine my dad going there and not having the protection. I just felt I have to do everything I can. But what happened is that for the first time in my life, I managed to marry my side of me that is quite political, very kind of active in the community, active for causes, and to bring that into the clothes and also see what it meant for the people that worked with me, because we were all feeling quite desperate at the time, wanting to do something, wanting to help. And it just gave us agency, that project. It gave us like something. I mean, it was quite literally, helping to protect the people that were putting themselves in harm's way to protect all of us. So there was something really strong about that. And I thought, right, well, I need to find a way to charge other clothes with message in that way, or with something that would change, that would just make them more than clothes that we wear, that they would have this agency. And for me, of course, climate change and the effect of our industry of it is something that is for many years in the forefront of my mind. And that's when I thought, right, it needs to be something that people can participate with. And that was the time as well that I kind of got exposed, because I went back to Instagram after having, I think, an 8-year break. And I got kind of realized there's a big sewing community out there, something that was kind of, I knew in a way that happened, but not in the way that it did. And I think that it clicked that it needs to be a book, that takes you through this journey, and to create a garment that is imbued with the experience of growing with the experience of nature. So the kind of, you sow the seeds for something, and then the whole process and how things connect is kind of in that dress that you wear, and that it could be a very powerful thing for people. And it happened so quick from the moment that I had the idea. Just I think it's going to be end of this month 2 years since I first got the idea and thought it could be a book, and it's already now in the shops, which is amazing. In terms of publishing, quite quick.
That's incredible, especially because there's been a lot of delays with printing and stuff as well, hasn't there?
We had actually, it was the publication day was delayed twice for this, but it was a very quick turnaround. But
that's so interesting, because I was trying to imagine, like, well, how did this book come about? Like, I was thinking maybe like you were initially going to do like a book on, I don't know, one of these areas, and then like all these extra things were being laid upon top of you, but it was already fully realised in those 4 layers in one, and then it was just the format was the question. So, but it's such a beautiful book, and it is massive. I can't believe it didn't take you 2 years alone just to write, rather than 2 years to have the idea and it actually then exists. First of all, what are your favourite projects or recipes or elements of the book?
It's actually really hard to choose between them. So the book has 5 crops in it. It's onion, nettle, rhubarb, blackberry and cabbage, and particularly want to have nettle and blackberry there, so if you don't have space to grow, you can still participate in the experience, because of both of these things in the UK you can forage. And nettle particularly, it's a wonderful dye plant, but very overlooked, as kind of, we see it as a pest because of the stinging, obviously. In terms of project, what is my favourite project? In the beginning of our conversation, I'm not sure if we're already recording, you mentioned that I'm wearing the onion dress, and the onion dress is just kind of my go to every summer, and I can't wait for it to get warm when I wear it. It's just so easy, and I put it on and I feel like myself. People always compliment on it, so I feel very free, not fussy, but still I know that visually it's nice and it works. And for me, I like it out of all the projects in the book, I guess, because it's a fairly easy one. I mean, if you don't know how to use a sewing machine at all, it's not the first thing to start from. But if you have some experience, it's not a very complicated dress, and it's quite, because of the pockets, it's quite impactful.
I love the pockets. I'm obsessed with the pockets in your book. They're so cool. They're so unique, and they look so practical as well. I cannot wait to figure out a way to implement them on a future project, because they're so cool.
Yeah. It's I love pockets too. Yeah, it's wonderful to include them, and I think other than the bolero, all the projects in the book include pockets, but they're all quite emotional garments for me. I think they're all based on some kind of experience in my past. So the onion dress, something that's based on something I designed before, and it's with me for years. The nettle duster is based on a coat from the Second World War that a friend of mine that lives in Berlin given me as a gift. It's a menswear jacket, and because when I pitched the idea to the publishers, there was this demand for, back then, what we used to call unisex garment, now gender fluid garment. So it was important for me to include some patterns that could work for both. So the Blackberry shirt dress, which can be cut as a shirt dress or a shirt, started from a menswear shirt that I cut for my very dear friend Sam, who has completely different frame of mind. He's someone that works out quite a lot. He's into martial arts. And I just tried it on once, and I thought, it looks really interesting on me, actually. I really like the way that the colour is quite big on me, and it kind of sits away from the body. Yeah, the Rhubarb Bolero is based on a bolero that I made actually for myself when I went to one of the Royal Academy dinners many years ago, and just a kind of a very special evening.
So many memories and
it's they're quite autobiographical, and I wanted to have this kind of something that also designs that very much reflect the way, I guess, that I like to dress. If I'm designing just not for myself or kind of more for broad customer in mind rather than the people that I make clothes for, which is quite practical, but also have this kind of romantic edge, I guess, to it. And I wanted things that would look really good with the dye and would look really good when you re-dye them as well. So,
I love so much that you've got some of the people that have plots at your allotment site actually modelling the clothes. It's so cool. That's such a nice thing. So what were their reactions when you approached them to be part of that?
I mean, they are such a big part of the book because, in a sense, it's quite, it's almost like a bit ludicrous that I get to write a gardening book because I haven't been doing it for that long. I'm not an expert. But the people that taught me, and particularly Mr. Sadiq, who is a repeating character in the book, and the book is actually dedicated to, he taught me everything. And he actually the one that planted onions. He used to plant things because I got the plot, it was very overgrown, and he helped me clear it, sometimes just coming digging next to me without saying a word. And he would just kind of, sometimes when I wasn't there, he would plant things in patches that I cleared to kind of encourage me to keep on going. It was a really quite big project to get it to restore it to something that you can work with. I learned a lot from him, and actually what I do in the book, in the gardening sections, but actually in all the section, I kind of almost stand on people's shoulders and share information that has been running, let's say, in Mr. Sadiq's family. Mr. Sadiq is from a farming community in Pakistan originally. And also this wonderful, incredible idea that I am a 37-year-old woman and he is going to be 89 this June.
Wow.
And he's from Pakistan and I was born in Israel, and we managed to form a friendship over the land. And for me to learn from him and to learn how you grow coriander in Pakistan and how he managed to adapt it to growing coriander from Pakistan with a seed bud in northeast London.
I need a tip because my coriander looks shocking and it's gone really rubbish.
I think it's a lot with him is in the seed. And it's kind of not giving it actually too much water as well. But it's really hard because it's been so dry this year. So Mr. Sadiq, and I showed in the book, always told me not to water onions with tap water unless they're desperate. But and I think about it every time that I water, and I'm like, I'm sorry, Mr. Sadiq, but I'm going to give them some tap water.
So what was his reaction when you asked him to model the
particularly with Mr. Sadiq, I think he was kind of, even now that he's seen the book and he's seen it and he's seen himself in it, I think he still kind of go, weird thing that you're doing. It's not, nothing really, or he's seen the cover for the first time that I brought the book actually to the allotment to show it to him. He was like, showing too much leg on the cover. He has such a sense of humor, and he's really someone who's very helpful. And I said to him, would you like to be in the book? We want like, all right. and he really loved being photographed. And actually him and his friend Dean, if you look at my Instagram, there is something that I started doing which I call Allotment Fashion Week, because I love the way that they dress, and I'm just so inspired by the way that they dress as well. And yeah, and they just come and I compliment them on the clothes and like, oh, take a photo. And then this kind of became this tradition. So it's actually not the first time. Much. Yeah, it's not the first time that I document Mr. Sadiq. It's just that rather than doing it on my iPhone.
So he was like, oh, again, okay.
Oh, yeah, no, it just meant that my wonderfully brilliant photographer Julia has done it in a much better way than I could.
And actually, like, oh, finally, you got a proper photographer now.
They got along really well. And also the clothes that he's wearing in the book are actually all made for him, and they have Mr. Sadiq embroidered on the inside collar, and so it's kind of he's wearing the clothes. And Valerie, who's also in the book, wearing the onion dress. So again, I made the dress for her, and she was happy to take part. And Paula, who is a photographer, has just the most beautiful plot in the allotment, and she knew about the book, and she's someone that that she's also part of kind of creative community in Walthamstow, and was keen to be photographed. And Jed, who is in the Rhubarb chapter, Jed is actually not in my allotment. He's in Suffolk. He's the father-in-law of my friend Rosie, and just absolutely inspiring person in terms of everything that he does. But he grows the most amazing rhubarb, and he just loves the rhubarbs. He goes to his allotment and talks to it, and he was like a big part of my rhubarb chapter in terms of the story. So everything that I learned about rhubarb came from Jed. So I felt like, we had to go and photograph him wearing the rhubarb dyed clothes, because obviously he couldn't wear the bolero. It's one of the garments. It wasn't gender fluid in the book, but I made for him the nettle duster and the blackberry shirt and dyed them with rhubarb for him. And we shot him in his allotment, looking after his glorious rhubarb in the clothes.
Amazing. Yeah. I've got some rhubarb on the go in my little garden. It's not ready for picking yet, but when I do, I'm definitely going to try out some of the recipes for sure. I love that you got this such a lovely community at your allotment space as well. So talk me through your allotment. Like, what does it look like now? What have you got planted?
Oh, wow. It's actually, I was there yesterday. I'm going to go this evening. It's been a few really busy weeks, and I've been watering everything, but it really needs a good tidy. So there's always a good sized onion bed.
You grow by seed or by set?
I do both. Mostly sets. I find that easier, but Mr. Sadiq always says seeds, and I have his seeds that still in.
Does he save seeds?
He saves seeds, and he keeps them in a baby food jar that expired in 98. Just kind of like talking about sustainable living. That's a man of complete sustainable living without probably knowing the term. That's completely. The way that he lives. So saving. So some I would grow from Mr. Sadiq's seed, and some I would grow from sets, because it's easy and it's nice, and I have some varieties that I know that I go to, and since I started growing onions, which is something that because it's something that you think, right, if I grow vegetables, I'm going to grow this prized heirloom tomatoes, I'm going to grow this beautiful crown Prescott. The way that I think of onions now, I didn't used to think, because onions, you get them like the wholesale price in a bag in a supermarket, and you don't think about it much. Whilst if you want to buy really good tomato, it costs you a fortune. So that I just had this change of thinking, because actually onions can be this really prized, amazing vegetable. But you just kind of have to give it a go and know the varieties that you used to. And they just taste like no other onions that you would get in the shops.
And they're so versatile, aren't they? I think everything I cook starts with an onion.
Exactly. So, and that's why it's such a brilliant natural dye thing, even if you don't grow it, because it's so easy to save. So I have a good size bed of onions. I obviously have tomatoes that I put in as well. So what else do I have? I have beans.
Which type of beans?
Runner beans and dwarf French, which have done really well. What else do I have? I have 3 rhubarbs that I constantly have, and then I, in between seasons, I separate the crowns and use them for the dye. I have a dwarf blackberry plant. I have gooseberries. I have strawberries. I have different kind of kales, which I really love. A perennial kale that I planted this year and is struggling a bit for some reason, so I need to see how I could help it. What else in terms of veggies. Porcelain, which I love, which has... Actually, it's considered as a weed in some environments. It's something that spreads really easily. It's a salady thing that is quite succulent, and amazingly, it's one of the vegetables that is naturally very rich in omega-3.
Oh.
So it's really healthy and really delicious, and I find myself craving it in the summer. Like if I have some in the fridge, I would even go fancying some porcelain and go and get some from the fridge. So it needs high temperature to germinate. So actually in the summer, like it's something that you sow quite late and germinates quite late. And I have a lot of flowers. I have some things that anyone who's kind of interested in natural dye, like madder and woad and dire chamomile. Yeah, and a lot of things that just self-seed and are kind of poppies and a lot of things that cosmos that I just kind of let them self-seed and grow where they feel comfortable, and they help with pollinating and it's a real
beautiful.
It is. It's always a bit more like chaotic, and sometimes when Julie, my photographer, would come, and I feel like, gosh, I can't possibly have this photograph for a book and claim to know anything, because it always looks a bit chaotic. But I think it's kind of fine, and I was actually sharing a lot in the book about my failure with some things, and just to say, and if then some things that Mr. Sadiq fails with, and if he fails with it, then everyone can fail, because he's like the ultimate expert. And I think that's something actually that we need to share also in terms of sewing, because things sometimes, and you talk about it on the podcast. I think it's really important. Not everything always works.
Yeah, that's a big issue I think that people have with Instagram. It's because it's always like you show your beautiful new thing, and I think that can be quite disheartening for maybe beginners, and they see all these beautiful feeds of this gorgeous stuff, and then they don't see the fails, and they don't see the things that didn't really fit very well, and they don't see the thing that fell apart.
Yeah, as I said a bit earlier, I came back to Instagram during the pandemic, and I still... It's been amazing, and I connected with so many fantastic people, but I also struggle with it. I struggle with it, with the intensity of it, but almost how kind of almost perfect everything needs to be. I'm still kind of finding my way with it and feel ambivalent towards it, while recognizing that, it helped me connect with wonderful people and reconnect with wonderful people as well, that from the past, which I completely lost kind of touch with. But I think it's important to talk about realistically about what a creative process is.
I love that. I love that so much. As someone who clearly spent a lot of time thinking about and implementing aspects of sustainability within your work and your creations, do you have any tips for us makers who make stuff at home that we could implement if we want to create in a more sustainable way?
Yeah, so I think we should perhaps touch a bit on the natural dye in that aspect of things. And I would recommend anyone who hasn't listened to Amy Taylor's episode with you. She is just incredible. I enjoyed that episode so much. She's natural dye based in the States. I can't remember in which
Chicago,
Yeah, Chicago. Yes, she's just and I think, I listened to her, and her enthusiasm is just so infectious. Had I not already been involved with it, I would definitely want to give it a go. So go listen to her, because she was explaining the process and everything really well in a way that we'll probably don't have time to get into now. But what I find that is really interesting about natural dye, that if you start with sewing your garments with a cotton thread, which is more expensive, and it's supposed to be less strong, although I never had it breaking, and I wear these onion dresses. You can dye, and I find what's really interesting is re-dye. So I include in the book cabbage and blackberry, which caused a bit of a controversy in the dye community, because people, they're called what you refer to as fugitive dyes or stains, and they don't last as long. Although I did find that with blackberry particularly, if I store it away from the sun and I wash it very gently, it can last for more than a year. But I quite like the idea actually of things fading, because then you can re-dye it and you have a new garment.
That's a really interesting idea.
So it's kind of like, well, I wear the cabbage shorts, and then in 2 months or in a month, depending on how much I wear them or how much I wash them, the colour fades out to become a bit May, and then I might dye it with an onion, and then I might dye it with nettle on top of that, just to give it a new life. And this kind of creates this need for novelty that we got used to. And I kind of see actually the fact that, so I sometimes if I really want to keep something going for a long time, I would morden it and bind it and use the tannin, the whole process, which go back to Amy's episode and listen to. But actually sometimes no, it's fine. I'm just going to do like a mordant thing so it stays for, more than a week if I wear it a lot. And just when it fades out, great, let's do another onion, and this time use iron and just mix it with different things. And I really liked that. Yeah, I think it was important for me to highlight that aspect of it, and I go about it quite a bit in the book. And also, I think there's something really beautiful about naturally dyeing your clothes and then see the colours change, because that's how things are with nature as well. Things kind of blossom and then they die out. That feels more in tune in that way. And another thing that is amazing with natural dye, the onion dress that I'm currently wearing is all made of different antique French linen sheets, but it's made out of, I think, 6 different sheets, offcuts of things. And because I dye them together, it kind of has some, I can show you, although the listeners wouldn't be able, it just gives different effects on them.
Oh, so you've got the pocket has got a kind of paler section.
Yeah, and it's kind of, it had different stains and different kind of areas that the fabric, just a lot of imperfections really. But the natural dye just kind of sinks into, I don't know, such a beautiful way, and it almost makes it look like it has a story, like it had a life. So I think there's something you can use, like, I don't know, this bed sheet that perhaps your child spilled hot chocolate on and would not come out to make something, and marry it with another fabric and then dye it all together. And it just, because natural dye quite rarely gives like a very kind of cohesive kind of, result like synthetic dye do, it kind of works really well. It just makes it look like it has a story and this kind of depth, not just in the colour, but the way that it sits on the fabric. So I think naturally dyeing things is a huge tool in the arsenal of somebody that wants to work more sustainably and perhaps use more offcuts and, kind of have new ways of freshening up a garment that they love and experiment. And the other thing that I've done just this week with, again, having the event and some of my clients going to all these do's and wearing what you would call more kind of party or even cocktail kind of dresses, is that I started during the years creating dresses or shirts or bodies that would be kind of a base that you can change sleeves and colours for. Mm. So for Kathy in particular, I have like a bag in my studio that has all sorts of different colours and all sorts of different sleeves, and it just, that same dress just would come and it would be a different dress every year. And or it can just become sleeveless, because I would remove the sleeve and just and it's really hot this party season, because this week is really hot. Fantastic, let's just take the sleeve off, put a bias binding just to finish it nicely, and get like a really big flamboyant colour so she doesn't feel like the absence of the sleeve. And because once you get a pattern that really works for you, you can just play with it and make it into a different garment, and then you can go back. It's this power that you have in your hands when you know how to sew. Yeah, I can take off the sleeve and then return it in a few weeks' time for the winter. Or for autumn.
That's such a good point.
And I was very inspired seeing people hacking patterns, but I feel that loads of hacks that could be kind of ongoing, not just in the time that you make it. And I think it even can be the same pattern, but you just cut the sleeve off a different fabric or different color, and so giving it a new life. Because I feel that once you learn how to sew, and it's a superpower, I've seen people around like, well, I have to just sew all the time now and make more and more things because I can. And it's about learning to revalue what you have and how you can kind of stretch it a bit further, which is why I really love the idea of Me Made May and wearing things and understanding how to kind of get them to work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Well, you just dropped a couple of really powerful ideas there that I want to personally sit with for quite a while, because I think, you've just kind of blown my mind a little bit. I really, really love the idea of going back into a garment and like almost choosing to have a kind of temporary colour, because then you can play around and you can try something new with a different dye in the future. That's really exciting. And also, I think that we are very used to thinking, I've finished that garment. That's done. It's finished. I can't touch it again. I think sometimes that's when people often then don't necessarily want to go back in and tweak a fit or make some sort of alteration, because I think, no, that's done. I'll just, I'll learn that lesson, not do it again. But you can go back in. And I think that I'd also thought about that and that's something that I've tried to really emphasize with Me Made May, is that you can go back into a garment, you can alter the fit and stuff. But I've always thought of it in terms of, like making it feel more comfortable, making it work a bit better. But I hadn't necessarily thought of it as an opportunity for more creativity, the way that you just expressed it. So this has been so informative, and it's gone in lots of directions that I wasn't expecting. So thank you so much for being so open and sharing so much of your story with me today.
Thank you so much, Zoe. It's been wonderful to talk. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!